Today in Budget Builds, I answer a few questions from the last video. What does the car have in it? How much of the budget have I spent on it? And what are we going to have to do to fix it and get it into the 9's? The previous owner bought this car in 2006. Not too long after that, he decided to take it drag racing. With some moderate modifications, including ported heads, ported intake and cam, some suspension work, and a stall converter, he pulled an 1189 and a quarter mile in his car. He actually pulled the front tires off the ground a couple inches. That's pretty impressive for an LT1. But soon after, the speed bug got to him and he wanted to go faster. That's when he decided to take this car to the next level and build it up and get it into the 10s. He did quite a few modifications since that day. He ran the 1189, including this roll bar made out of chrome moly, 6-point removable door bars for safety. The drag strip out in Kansas City required it when you got into a certain time. When I said in the last video, it looks stock, that's the farthest truth on this car. The body's in fairly good shape. The clear coat started peeling, typical of these early 4th gen cars. But there are a lot of goodies packed into this car. He did a great job building this car, and unfortunately, due to some circumstances of the drag strip closing down and then the car developing an overheating issue, that with life, you know how it goes, projects tend to sit. This car sat 5 years when I bought it. And you'll see underneath and everything else, all the cobwebs and all the things that go with a car that's been sitting 5 years. All the things we're going to have to clean up and redo. Let's get into the heart of this car and see what he did to make it go faster. This is the original block out of the car. It's been bored and stroked. It's got a 383 fully forged internal set in it. It has Dark Pro 1 heads on it that have been ported by Lloyd Elliott. The intake as well was ported by Lloyd Elliott. It has a Lloyd Elliott custom grinds cam. As you can see, those coil packs don't belong in an LT1. Well, after a couple OptiSpark issues, he decided to go with the 24X conversion kit on this car. For those of you who don't know what that is, you remove the OptiSpark and change out the timing cover, and it adds a cam sensor and a crank sensor to the car. It then runs an LS1 computer and 8 individual coil packs. The tunability is greatly improved for this car. Anyone with HP tuners can tune this now. The old style for 93 would have been the old prom burn, and that is really much obsolete these days. Moving under the car, you can see it has an ATI super dampener, Canton oil pan, stainless steel long tube headers. For the front suspension and rear suspension, it has the QA1 struts and shocks with the coilovers in the front, aftermarket sway bar, after sitting for 5 years, after I started it up, it developed a few oil leaks, which is no big deal. The engine has to come out since it has a bad head gasket. Has a 4000 stall converter, and since he did the 24X conversion, he was able to put a 4L60E in this car, so he's able to control his shifts electronically. And it is built by Performa Built, stage level 2. They did a custom 3-inch dual exhaust into an X over the axle and 2 separate mufflers. In the previous video, a viewer commented that he loved the sound of the SLP exhaust. And I can't disagree, the SLP exhaust sounded great. But the previous owner got this exhaust right. He put the Hooker aerial chambers on here, and this is the best sounding LT1 I've ever heard. I started up for you, but the car had other ideas. When I went to start it up and do this video earlier this week, it decided that it was too cold and it fouled the plugs out. Since I'm pulling the engine out, I did not really feel like changing plugs just to get it started. So after manhandling it to get it into the garage, it's on the lift. The original 10 bolt was in the car when the car ran 1189. However, it didn't last much after this engine was installed. This is where he bought the S60 Strange. And he also bought the Strange race brakes as well. Now, on these earlier Stranges, they didn't add the extended bracket with the multi-tap holes in it, so they had to add the lower control and relocation brackets. As you can see, this car has pretty much tubular everything under the suspension. The car hooks, and we're hoping it's going to be able to hook with all the power we do put into it. So, as far as I can tell, the only thing we have to do on this car is pull the engine, tear it apart, send it out, have the block and heads checked to make sure there's nothing warped. And at that point, we might as well put new bearings and new rings. And since we're going to have to put new rings in it, we're going to gap them. So I think you know what's going to happen next to get this car into the 9's. I purchased this car for $4,900. With getting it running and diagnosing the cooling system, I have $5,000 invested out of the budget. The previous owner was building this car to hit 10s on the motor. This engine dynoed at 461 horsepower and torque at the wheels. That should be more than enough to hit the 10 seconds. I don't think it's enough to hit the 9 seconds though. So it's going to need a little help. As I mentioned before, we're going to gap some rings. So that means nitrous. It's the cheapest option to hit the 9's in my budget. You always have supercharging and turbocharging as an option, but those can be very expensive, especially if you do it right and make sure the car doesn't get hurt. So we're going to be pulling the engine, tearing the engine down, sending it to the machine shop, getting it back and rebuilding it, installing the nitrous system, which includes taking out the tank and adding a second pump for its own fuel line for the nitrous. We're going to use a progressive controller so we don't hurt the engine. And I believe with all that, we're going to get this thing into the 9's. The previous owner built this car right, spent the money where it needed to be spent, and built an amazing car. He had a passion. He wanted to see this thing into the 10's. But unfortunately, with the drag strip closing and then the car constantly having a few little issues here and there, he never got to the track to test it. So, when we go in the spring to Gateway International, I asked that owner to come back out and drive this car down the track to hit the 9's. I'm not a drag racer. I don't even pretend to be. If anyone can get this car into the 9's, it'll be him. So there will be a little reunion with the previous owner in this car in the spring when we go to Gateway International and hit the 9's. Thanks for watching. Please leave comments below if they're good, bad, or anything. I'd love to hear them. And please subscribe.